Hi everybody and welcome back to yet another video. Today we're going to be talking about effects that I think everybody should know about. You don't have to use them, but I highly recommend using them. I use them in my game and I personally really like the way that my ReShade looks. And of course I will share that with you guys as well. This is Jess from the future. Hi, I really forgot to say that all of these effects that I'm going to be showing you in this video require your depth buffer to be set up. If you want to learn how to set that up, please do check out the tutorial that I've made for ReShade version 5. And then come back to this one and try out all of these fun effects. Okay, back to the video. The first one we're going to be talking about is one of the most basic and I think most used effects by now, our trusty ADOF or 𝙎𝙤𝙧. Now this is one of the most popular background blurs to use, but it can look a little bit intimidating at first, but it's honestly my absolute favorite. This is my one ReShade effect that I cannot deal without. So I'll show you really quickly just how to set up the basics because it's very simple. The first thing we're going to do is disable the autofocus because the game cannot autofocus on its own. Now you notice everything goes blurry and that's because of our focal depth, but we're going to be adjusting that in a second. The first thing we're going to be doing, I don't know if you noticed, but it took quite a while for the blur to kick in or like come back to you. And that's because the autofocus adjustment speed is really low, so we're going to just increase that to 1 first of all, because otherwise it's going to be a pain to try to adjust anything. Now the reason why this is so blurry right now is because our manual focus depth is set to 0.001, which is right at your screen. For this effect, the value 1 is at your horizon, and 0.001 or 0 is right at your screen. So that's why everything is blurry right now. What you want to set this as kind of depends on how far away you have the camera from your horse, how far you zoom out in photo mode and stuff with the camera. So this is subjective, but I usually keep mine at around 0.400. Let's set it to 450 because I have my camera quite far back right now just for recording's sake. So let's put it like 450. Now you notice now there's no blur all of a sudden again, and that's because we will need to be using these two values to adjust the amount of blur, and especially this one. The hyperfocal depth distance, basically think of it as kind of a camera lens. Like the longer the lens and the closer the subject, the more the things in the background are going to be blurry. So we're just going to be increasing that. I have mine to about 0.8 maybe. Again, subjective. I'm gonna be saying that a lot in this video. Everything that I do is subjective. It's all what you prefer, how you like, what you like the look of and stuff like that. So, you know, take what I say here with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to show you what values to change. And then I'll adjust my far blur curve to basically say how quickly this intensity is going to kick in. So I usually bring mine down. I like having a lot of background blur, so maybe 1300, something like that. Hot tip that I didn't learn until way too late. If you double click, you can manually type the value that you want, but I usually like to slide it anyways just to see what I'm doing, you know? But if you know exactly what you want, you can just double click and type in the value instead. This is like the basic setup of the DOF effect. The rest of this is basically just like personalization. I can really recommend playing around with these values a little bit and try to personalize how you want your blur to look. Again, you know, it completely depends on what taste you have, but this is the basics of that effect, and this is by far my favorite DOF effect to use. Please do note that in the effect list, if you have multiple effects enabled, ADOF should pretty much be, or any background blur should pretty much be at the bottom of the list. So let's say I want to use the adaptive fog here. By default it's above, but if I were to put this below, you can see that objects start clipping through the trees and stuff. So if you use a background blur with any other effects, always put the blur at the bottom. The next effect that I'm going to be showing you is a ambient occlusion effect. So it's basically going to give you shadows and stuff around objects, which I really think gives some nice definition. This one is called PPFX SSO. I can also recommend highlighting or holding your cursor over effects and values and stuff because it usually tells you a little bit about what it does. But this one is basically adds some shading and contrast to objects based on the geometry of the game. And the first thing I'm going to tell you about this effect is that when using any of these types of effects with ambient occlusion that involve lighting and shading and stuff like that, I highly recommend looking for a setting called debug mode, or debug view as it's called here. You can see it at the bottom. It's currently off, but if I turn it on, I can see what's actually being outputted or affected by this effect. So it makes it a lot easier sometimes to see what you're actually doing, because sometimes it can be hard to see what's actually being affected and what's not. You can obviously see that something's happening, but it's not super easy seeing what. So if an effect has this option, I highly recommend turning it on. As you can see, it's currently giving off a lot of color in the trees, a lot of contrast around my shirt and stuff. My shirt is red, so you can see that it like shades the bottom of my face a bit red as well, because it's kind of reflecting off of it. And this effect is just really nice for giving contrast and quality and emphasizing the objects that are in the game. And I highly recommend adjusting these sliders to your preference. I personally don't like having a super strong ambient occlusion, so I'll just go ahead and adjust a little bit. So there we go. Here's something that I like the look of. You can take a look at my values here if you want to copy them, and then I'm going to turn off the debug view, and now I can see what it's actually looking like in game. So as you can see, I don't like having mine super strong, but it's a really nice effect that I think looks lovely paired with other effects, and I love what it does to the game. It really adds a lot in my opinion, especially in combination with other effects. If you know me, you know that I always have way too many effects in my presets, but that's because I use a little bit from everywhere and try to like combine it into something that I really like. There's actually kind of like a part 2 to this effect, because there's another alternative to use for some ambient occlusion, and that's 𝙎𝙬𝙧 or 𝙎𝙤𝙧. It's included in the same effect pack as ADOF. So it basically does the same thing, except it doesn't really have color in the same way that SSO does, which is kind of why I honestly prefer SSO, but I know that some people have troubles with it. It's an effect that can bug for certain people, so if you can't use that, maybe you can use this one. But it's basically the same thing. You can still use a debug view and see kind of what it outputs, but you can see that it outputs a lot less than the other one does. It's the same thing here. You basically just adjust it to your preference. This is kind of a nice preference for me personally, honestly, because I don't like having it super strong. Something like this maybe, and then I just turn off the debug view, and now I've got my effect set up. Let me actually go into photo mode and kind of zoom in a little bit closer. So you notice you get a lot more shading around the object. You see it in, like under my arms, around my cheeks, around my chin. You'll see it by the horse's mane and stuff. It just adds a little bit of contrast, which I think honestly does a lot, especially if you want to take pictures. It just gives that extra level of dynamic range. This next effect is called CanvasFog, and it's another effect that I use like all the time because it's super versatile and you can do a lot with it. I'm going to show you 2 ways that I use it, but it can be used in endless amounts of ways, and I really encourage you to try out this effect and just mess around with the settings and have fun with it. So it's called CanvasFog, and by default it looks like this, which isn't great. It's not super interesting, maybe not super helpful. I guess the 3 main controls or whatever of this effect that you should be aware of is the color changing here. So you can change the color of the fog, of a certain type of the fog. You can also change the opacity of the fog with these 2 sliders. Then the next one is basically the gradient type. So you have 4 different types of gradients here, and then you can adjust your blending modes and stuff, but we'll get into that in a second. You have 4 different types of gradients, and depending on what gradient you have active here, you will be using one of these tabs here. So you have linear, radial, strip, and diamond gradient control, all corresponding to whichever gradient you have enabled. And besides that point, you also have the fog controls here. I recommend using the adaptive fog, which is the default one. It's pretty straightforward. If you've ever used adaptive fog in the normal effect, like the normal effect adaptive fog, then you'll know what to do with this one. But you basically change the amount of fog, the curve of the fog, and where you want the fog to start. Now here's one of the ways that I usually use this effect. I really like making like a kind of sky haze gradient kind of thing. So I use the linear gradient fog here. I will use the linear gradient controls to change the angle of it, and then I will adjust the position to bring it down a little bit lower. The first thing that I'm going to do is change the bottom color here, which I usually try to keep quite warm. I like having a warm color in my presets, so something like kind of this. I usually do keep this one as max. I bring down the adaptive fog itself instead, but then I'll set like a purple or a red kind of up here, but setting the transparency to 0. And the thing, you might think that, oh, now you can't see it, but you can. You'll notice it just happens. You can see it in the blending of the other color, basically. So we'll see. Now we go down to the adaptive fog, and I will first of all, I'll bring back the fog start. Let's put it there maybe. Then I'll use the fog curve. I usually keep this quite low, like 10, just for a really faint fog, and then that's why I keep the max fog factor at 100, and also that's why I keep the opacity of the bottom color at max, because I'm going to be reducing the opacity anyways. So let's we can actually bring back the fog a little bit more. I feel like that gives a nice gradient, maybe a little bit more orange. I like give a little bit more yellow. Can go a little bit more red here. There we go. I like that. And of course, like, this on its own, in my opinion, isn't something I really like, but again, I use these in combination with other effects. Let me actually put this into daylight for you guys so we can see it properly. So that's one of the ways that I would use this. I would also pair it then with my depth of field. As you can see, here's what I was talking about the weird edges, because they're in the wrong order. So I'll just bring my fog above the blur, and now it looks really nice in my opinion. So this is one of the ways that I would be using CanvasFog. Now, if we turn off the DOF, I'll show you a second way that I use this. I like to make a kind of a light point, I guess. So what I'll use then is the radial fog or the radial gradient. As you can see here right now, it's just a yellow dot. But I'll use the sun is really bright, so let's put it to like this, and then again something warm. Now for this, we go into the radial gradient control, and I'll adjust the size. Let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And then by using this one, you can adjust how sharp you want the gradient to be. I usually keep it to around default, unless I want something really specific. Again, I would be using this in pairs with something else, so I could use this as a point of light. In my background, I use that a lot actually, since I am a sucker for backlights, so I love using that. But maybe something like this. You can of course make it more like drastic if you want, or create a completely different effect. It's a super versatile tool. This is just how I like it to use it. Again, I'm pretty conservative with how I like to make my presets, but you can honestly do so much, and just feel like don't be afraid to experiment a little bit. Now the next effect that I'm going to be showing you guys is the effect called StageDepthPlus. And you'll notice I have 2 of them because I've duplicated one of mine so I could have separate backgrounds, but let's not bother with that for a second. So let's just focus on the StageDepthPlus effect. Right now it looks kind of awful because it's usually paired with all of my other effects, but let's just, you can just reset it to default. The way that this effect works is basically it takes any PNG that you have. It can be a logo, it can be a sky replacement, as I have here. You can like add a full backdrop. I saw when this effect became really popular, a lot of people were using it like with pictures of Red Dead and stuff, just like really replacing the entire game background, which was so cool to see. I like having more subtle backgrounds and like color changing, or like here with some clouds and nice sunsets. And the way that you do add this PNG is basically you just go into your client folder. So for me that is this file path here, but that's basically where you set up ReShade 2, and you will have this folder here called ReShade Shaders. So you just go into that folder and you can go into textures. And the PNG that this effect targets is the one called stage image. So that's the one you'll see here. By default, it's like an informative text. It basically tells you like replace this PNG with any of your choice or whatever it says. So it's basically just like instructions. So what you'll do is just download any PNG. It has to be a PNG file. Just add any PNG and rename it to stage image. If it doesn't replace the initial instruction file, the reshade effect is not going to detect it. So just make sure it's called stage image, that it's a PNG file, and then you just click reload in the reshade overlay. So if I were to replace this one, let's put this one there. So this is a JPEG file. So what I do, I just open mine with Paint, Microsoft Paint, good old trusty Paint, and then I just go to File and Save as a PNG picture. And by default, it brings me into this folder because I've done it so many times. But what I do is I just basically click the image that I want to replace. So you'll see it'll now be called Staged Image and PNG. So I just click Save. It'll ask me if I want to replace it, and I'll say yes. So now you'll see that the Staged Image picture is this one here, right here. And what I do is I just go back into my game, and I will click Reload here at the bottom, and it will replace the file. So now I have the other picture. Obviously we don't want it looking like this, right? So what we're going to be doing is adjusting the depth here. For this effect, 1 is at your screen and 0 is at the horizon. So I'll just bring it back. Let's put it like as far back as possible, basically. That's what I usually do. And then I use this value here called depth smoothing to just bring it in front a little bit if I want that. Again, looks kind of awful on its own, but usually if you pair it with any background blur, it's gonna look a lot better. And I think that it can give some really cool effects. Again, this isn't the picture that I was using at the moment, so I'm gonna switch back actually. So that's how easy that effect is to use. And then you just tweak it to get it to look exactly how you want. Since I don't know if you noticed, but both of my pictures were portrait pictures instead of landscape, which is what the screen is. So I'll just like increase my scale a little bit, try to stretch it. Not too much, I don't need it anyways. But then I just move it up a little bit so I get the kind of the part of the picture that I want, which is this one. And you'll see, I think that gives a really nice warm sunset gradient kind of thing. And then you can use a lot of different blend modes to achieve different looks. So that's StageDepthPlus. I highly recommend you checking out my good friend 𝙎𝙚𝙧 tutorial on this effect. It gives a little bit more of a quick rundown on how to use it. But yeah, this is how I use it, and I highly recommend experimenting with it again and just using it for different things. This next effect that I'm going to be talking about is actually technically 2 effects again, but these actually need each other to work. The effect is called NiceGuyLighting, so it basically gives a whole different dimension to the game because it's ambient occlusion. Again, kind of like SSO or 𝙎𝙬𝙧, but this is like in a whole another level. It can also be used for reflections if you want to use it for that stuff. But I highly recommend using this effect. And the way you need to use it is you download it from GitHub right here, and I will have the link to this effect in the description. All you need to do is to click code here and then download zip. Once you've done that, you will extract the folder, which is called NiceGuyShaders main, and you will place it into the ReShade shaders folder. So we were in textures before for stage depth, now we're going to be going into shaders. We'll place it in this folder, and if you go into it, you'll see you have the shaders here, and then you'll also be downloading this one. This one is called ReShade Motion Estimation, and it helps basically estimate the motion for the other effect. So you'll download this one as well. Same thing here. Click code, download zip, extract it, and put it into ReShade shaders. So you'll see it here. ReShade Motion Estimation. Now, after you've done that, you will need to go back into Star Stable, and you will go into the ReShade overlay. You'll then go into settings, and then you will have to add the search path to these effects. So you'll see I already have mine, obviously. But what you do is basically you just click the plus here, and then you'll see you'll start off in the client folder here. So same thing again, press ReShade shaders, then find the 2 folders. For this one, you can just select this one straight away, and then for NiceGuyShaders, you click this one, and then you go click shaders specifically. So you click select, and then it's going to create that search path here. I'm going to be deleting that one since I already have mine. But that basically means that ReShade is searching for effects in those folders. And all you need to do then is go into the Home tab again and click Reload, and you should be able to find these effects in your ReShade overlay. So the first thing we're going to do then is search for DRME, which is the motion estimation. Unless I didn't just open my map, I didn't mean to do that. And I honestly just leave this to default because I do not mess with this effect too much. I just set it here, and it basically helps a little bit with the clarity of the other effects, which I will show you in a second here. So it's NiceGuyLighting. So we just select that one, and boom. Now this doesn't look great, right? Also please do note that they should be in this order. The RME should be above the other one, and in general, the motion estimation should be at the very top of your effect list if you have a lot of other effects. So this one should be at the top. Now this doesn't look great, but I think you can see kind of what this shader does. It just basically adds dynamic lighting in a way that like light bounces off of objects, it casts shadows, it casts lighting, like I said, like SSO or 𝙎𝙬𝙧𝙎𝙬𝙧, but like on a whole nother level. The first thing that I suggest that you do is you scroll down to your preprocessor definitions here, and I believe the UI difficulty is by default set to 0, and if it is, just click 1, just type in 1 and hit enter instead, and you'll get a few more options in the settings here. So basically, again, remember what I said about ambient occlusion shaders. We're going to be going into the extra tab here and select the lighting debug view. So now you can see what it's actually doing. You can see how much green it's reflecting, you can see how much shadow and light it's casting, and we will basically just adjust this as we please. For my taste, it's a little bit dark, so I'll basically just be tweaking this a little bit. Okay, I think this will do for now. This is basically just a setup that I'm running with for now. Remember that it also reflects off of color, so if you use a different outfit or a different horse, it's gonna look different. I think I've got the best results from like baby horses on this, honestly. it looks the best. The white kind of gets washed out, but you can see that it's reflecting like the green of the grass kind of on him, which it's realistic in the sense that like that's what it would look like in a picture technically. Maybe not the strong, but it's kind of accentuated. And again, you know, always pairing it with my DOF, and I think it just looks really, really nice. This is an effect that I've quite recently been made aware of, and I honestly don't play without it anymore. I like playing with it on as well. It just brightens up the entire game so much, and I love how it looks. And I'll also show you guys, just like if you turn on the debug mode, wrong way, there we go, the lighting here, what the motion estimation does, it basically, if you look at my character as she's moving, you'll notice that there's not a lot of what's called ghosting, which is basically when the reflections kind of drag. You can see a little bit, it's not perfect all the time. There's a slight latency in the movement, but it's not much. But if I turn off the DRME, you see how pixelated it becomes and how like rough it looks. But if you use the DRME, it just looks so much better because it actually tries to follow. If you look at the horse's nose and stuff, you can see how it's like, yeah, you know, it gets super noisy and buggy and crispy. But using the motion estimation, it makes it look a lot more coherent. So that's why you need both. I guess you could technically make it without the motion estimation if you're only taking pictures, but it's also like, if you're downloading the first one, you might as well download the second one, you know? It's not that hard to add effects, so. So this is the setup that I'm currently running, and I'll show you the effects that I use. You see I have the NiceGuyLighting, I have my SSO, I have the stage depth, I have a CanvasFog, and I have the ADOF. So yeah, I use all of these effects like all the time, and I love the way that it makes my game look. And I mean, let's be real here. This is what my game looks just now, straight up, and with ReShade, and then I'll just, if I turn it off, this is the game vanilla, and of course it's a nice game, but it's like, ReShade really brings a whole different dimension to it, and I love using it, so that's why I'm sharing this info with you guys. So hopefully you guys can mess around and have some fun with these effects, and maybe I'll do one of these again in the future, because Lord knows there are plenty of effects that I haven't yet to discover, and that I could have brought it up in this video that I didn't. So maybe we'll make a part 2. And if there's an effect that you want me to share, then let me know in the comments below. And if you did find this video helpful, please do leave a like. It really helps me out a lot. A subscription and some comments are always appreciated. Thank you. And of course, if you need help with ReShade or any of these effects, please do join the Star Stable Photography Center on Discord, and we will try to help you out. But thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!